centuries. You don't know where you land. It's so dark in mythology. Treasures of history to be found. Hidden legends of time. All the handiworks remain. Only the dream away. Orion, Orion,
Season 22 ran from the 5th of January until the 30th of March 1985, and by the time it started, people had been stewing over the utter failure of the twin dilemma for almost a year. High up in the BBC had it in for the show and used its influence to cancel it, a cancellation that came into effect after the season. Now, how Colin Baker got the role of the Doctor was odd. He was the first person to play the part who was already a massive fan of the show. He had seen An Unearthly Child on initial broadcast as a law student and was immediately hooked. He was also the first person who did not have to audition for the part. There was no second choice for the Sixth Doctor. What happened was this. While playing Maxwell, he became friends with one of the crew and was invited to their wedding soon after. He attended and was such an effortless raconteur that JNT, who was also attending, decided on the spot that he would be the perfect Doctor. Now, Colin was one of the few doctors who had no say in how his Doctor dressed. He wanted to dress in black and basically be Mr. Darcy the suave space bastard. But JNT overruled him and gave him that costume. The structure of the stories had changed too. Last season, Resurrection of the Daleks had been put out as 2 45-minute episodes, and they liked the results so much that all of Season 22 was to be handled like that. Unfortunately, that had the side effect of keeping the Doctor out of the story for a little longer than usual. Traditional stories had the Doctor getting directly involved in the action near the end of Episode 1. But some of the writers on Season 22 were still in that mindset, so the Doctor often only really gets involved near the end of Episode 1, or halfway through the story. The best example of this is Revelation of the Daleks, where Perry and the Doctor spend 45 minutes wandering around in the snow. Now, before we begin, do you want to know something odd? Pierce Brosnan nearly got the role of Maxwell. Now, I'm not saying that if he had, then Pierce would have played 6 and we would have got Colin Baker as James Bond, but we can imagine, can't we? Anyway, we start with Attack of the Cybermen. Yet another story where they spend some time being mysterious about the identity of the villains, unaware that the title has already spoiled it. This is a direct-ish sequel to Resurrection of the Daleks and an inferior copy. And it's also a sequel of sorts to half of Doctor Who history. It features/references the junkyard from Unearthly Child, the cyber tombs on Telos from Tomb of the Cybermen, the destruction of the Cybermen's home planet Mondas from the 10th Planet, Cybermen in the London sewers a la The Invasion, and of course a returning face from Resurrection of the Daleks in Lytton. Lytton was a Dalek agent in Resurrection who turned against them. In this he's working for the Cryons, the natives of Telos who'd like the Cybermen to leave their planet alone. They are also fish lesbians. One of the noteworthy parts of this story are the Doctor's attempts to finally fix the chameleon circuit, which results in hilarious scenes like this.
Oh, neat, Doctor.
Neat?
Very neat.
This is getting ridiculous.
I'm not saying a word.
Of course, it's back to normal by the end of the story. Like Resurrection, this story is very, very violent. From a cyber beheading, to Lytton getting his hands crushed, to countless deaths by shooting. And even the Doctor gets in on the action. Yeah, Doctor, yeah. Show them why you're the man who never would. Yeah! But like pretty much all of this season, it's not that great. Sorry. This season has 3 settings. Crap, less crap, and okay. I'd file this under less crap. The next one, Vengeance on Varos, is okay. It's the planet Varos where society is run by a particularly extreme form of democracy, where the people often vote on the leader's performance, and if they don't like it, he dies. Of course, they vote on other people's deaths too. Almost everyone's. Voting and televised deaths are constant in life on Varos. It's a shitty planet, and the government tries everything they can to distract the people from that fact. At least until the people vote to execute the governor for being crap. And then the new governor tries again. Also hanging around is the best creation of the Colin Baker era. Syl, a small, weaselly, unscrupulous alien and a parody of insane capitalism. Yes, Doctor Who invented the Ferengi.
The punishment dome. We sell tapes of what happens there.
That is enterprising.
Syl's a representative of a mining corporation, here to buy some rare ore that Varos has for ridiculously low prices. The Nagus would be so proud. And what's Perry up to? She's being turned into a bird. Because sometimes reality TV executions aren't quite spicy enough. This is the first of the season's OK stories. It was clever to find inspiration in video nasties. They were extreme videos that were newly available in the UK and causing controversy. Syl is a wonderful character and I really wish he'd come back. Jason Connery turns up as a space-filling non-actor and revolutionary, and there's a scene where lots are convinced that the Doctor murders people with an acid bath. He doesn't. If he did, I would be the first to admit it, / use it to support my tiresome obsession with proving the Doctor's daughter wrong.
You forgive me if I don't join you.
But I do admit it does look a bit dodgy. The Mark of the Rani introduced the last recurring Time Lord villain in the show, the Rani. She's a renegade scientist with little or no interest in ethics, or anything that could slow down her research. She's cold, utterly amoral, and her worst crime was when she used a chameleon arch and pretended to be human to get a role in Dynasty. What's she doing? Stealing the brain chemicals that allow people to sleep from some yokels, which has a side effect of creating Luddite riots. You see, she rules an alien planet, and her experiments have stopped many of her subjects from sleeping, so she's collecting the chemicals to give to her subjects. She teams up with the Master, though it's less a team-up and more like Margaret Thatcher being irritated by a brain-damaged Boris Johnson. Yes, the Master is alive again. He was last seen burning to death. Are you beginning to see why I don't think they needed to explain how he survived in the last of the Time Lords? It's his thing, and he never explains.
I thought that last mad scheme of yours had finished you for good.
You jest, of course. I'm indestructible. The whole universe knows that.
This is one of the weirdest horrible ideas in classic Who. One that sounds really, really silly, but it gets worse the more you think about it. The Rani lays mines which turn people who step onto them into trees. They're conscious, immobile, and unable to get help, waiting for one day to be cut down. And that day might be a long time in the future. It's so silly, but at the same time it's terrifying. Kind of like a worse version of Lockton syndrome. So, do you remember when I said that Ainley's Master generally used disguises better than Delgado's? I take that back for this story, because like Time Flight, he is dressed up for no reason. But this time, he's dressed up like a scarecrow. Because it's perfect following the Doctor wear. What with scarecrows usually being immobile and all. This is one of 2 celebrity historicals this season. They were very unusual for classic Who, and getting 2 in one season is just weird. In this story, it's George Stephenson, the inventor of the steam train. Overall, I call this story less crap. It could be worse, but it could be much better. I like the Rani. Here, anyway. She suffers badly in every other TV appearance she has. She basically turns into the Master with tits. Years before that actually happened in a Stephen Moffat story.
You're the camp one.
I'm not camp.
Oh, yeah. Nice tits.
Bumps.
The Two Doctors comes next, the only non-anniversary TV multi-doctor story. Patrick Troughton had so much fun filming the 5 Doctors that he asked to come back for another story. I've heard a rumour that he enjoyed doing the 2 Doctors so much that he talked about wanting to appear again, unrecognisable as a background monster. But I've never confirmed that, and it definitely didn't happen, as Patrick Troughton died within a few years of filming this story. Fraser Hines came back as Jamie too, meaning we have my 2 favourite Doctors and my 2 favourite companions, and it's written by Robert Holmes, the best writer the show ever had. So logically, I should love this. Well, no. This is half good and half terrible. It has the single worst looking Sontarans in the entire show's history. Look at these guys. They were so proud of this look that they reused the prosthetics and actors for a short called A Fix with Sontarans, which I'll talk about in another video. The disastrous look of the Sontarans is just the visual representation of what's wrong with this story. Something interesting and good, hamstrung by idiocy and fuck-ups. So, what's good? It introduced one of my favourite one-appearance aliens in the Androgum. They're a race of space gourmands, obsessed with food, and they don't give a shit about the welfare of what they eat. I love the scene where they tenderize Jamie for eating while he's conscious and feeling everything.
It looks very painful.
That's simply a nervous reflex. I've been butchering all my life. Primitive creatures don't feel pain in the way that we would.
Like usual, Robert Holmes was inspired by things that annoyed him. This time he's being an angry vegetarian. What's bad? Most other things, really. Even the Sontarans are as pointless as they are terrible looking. Basically, the second Doctor has been captured and is being slowly transformed into an Androgum, and the sixth Doctor and Perry team up with Jamie to rescue him, to undo it before Six becomes an Androgum as well. As setups go, that's not awful, it's stupid. Yeah, but it's not awful. But it's completely reversed. It should be Six who gets captured, and Two that has to rescue him. That way they don't need to come up with hand-waving explanations of why Six can't remember where Two was in the story. Plus, there's the fact that we know that Two doesn't stay in Androgum, so there's no tension. They try to create tension by having Six slowly turn into one in the show, but it doesn't work. Why? He's not an Androgum. Well, there's more to it than that. Like the Sontarans want the secrets to the Rathlon Impriture. Time Lord biological alterations that make TARDIS time travel possible. This is the last bit of foreign location shooting used in the classic show. The next time they'd leave the UK would be the McGann TV movie, and then Fires of Pompeii with David Tennant. They filmed this in Seville, Spain, after they discovered they didn't have enough money to film in the originally scripted locale, New Orleans. And that brings me to a dramatization of how I imagine this story came to be. Warning! This didn't really happen. Hello, Robert. I loved your Androzani script. Would you like to handle another one in season 22? Of course. I have a great idea already. It'd be about food and animal rights. Sounds perfect. 4 parts. I want 2 doctors. Set it in New Orleans. Go. New Orleans? The food capital of the world? Perfect. The other doctor. Which one? The one with the flute. The one who gets sent on missions by the Time Lords. Are they even the same one? You'll work it out. Go! Finished that script. It's some of the best work I've ever done. This is amazing. Slight problem. I need it to be 6 parts. Go! Okay. 6 parts. Done. I had to fudge a few things and add some padding, but it's finished. Still pretty good. I love it. Slight problem. Everyone loves returning monsters, and you invented the Sontarans. Add some. But there's nothing intelligible for them to do. That's the spirit. I knew you'd agree. Go! Done. Added the effing Sontarans. It doesn't make any sense, but they're there. Can I go now? This story needs something. What? I don't know yet. By the way, this season will be done as 45-minute episodes rather than 25. Do I need to double the length of my script? Oh, no. Just sort of edit the episodes together. 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6. That sort of thing. But the structure will be totally ruined. I have faith in you, Robert. Go! Done and done and done and done. I need an effing holiday. Oh, where are you going? Oh, I was thinking about Spain. Good choice. By the way, we can't afford New Orleans, and I suddenly think we should set this in Spain. So rewrite the story to fit. The whole story is based on food. There's nowhere in Spain that fits. That's why you're the writer. Use your imagination and make things happen. Go! This show will be the death of me.
I will remember you.
And now you know how I imagine this came to be. And that bit where they weren't sure which doctor was working for the Time Lords, that's broadly accurate. Sort of. In the story, the second Doctor is press-ganged into working for the Time Lords. even though it was the third Doctor who was regularly forced to do missions for the Time Lords and not the second. The words Time Lords weren't even introduced to the show until the second Doctor's final story, The War Games. Robert Holmes assumed the Doctor always did missions for the Time Lords and didn't think to check. It's understandable, as it had been 15 years plus earlier, but it led to something brilliant. Season 6B. A piece of fanon which entered the extended universe, and even has its own page on the BBC Doctor Who website, making it roughly as close to canon as Doctor Who gets. The theory went like this. We never saw the second Doctor regenerate in the War Games. He was sucked off into the void and then appeared as 3 the next season. But here he was in the Two Doctors, working for the Time Lords. This can't have been before the War Games, because the first thing they did after making contact with the second Doctor was try and execute him. Plus, he's visibly much, much older. The idea was that he was grabbed before the execution was carried out, that he was forced to do missions for the Time Lord Secret Service, the Celestial Intervention Agency that was introduced in The Deadly Assassin. Season 6B also explains his appearance in the 3 and 5 Doctors without using the shorting out the time differential as well. It also explains why the second Doctor had a TARDIS recall device in the Two Doctors. A TARDIS recall device that the 6th Doctor had said that he always wanted.
A Statenheim remote control? Where did you get that? I've always wanted one of those.
Some of us have earned these little privileges.
He was given it by the Time Lords to make him a more efficient agent. Then they removed it later on and messed with his memory for reasons. The only big problem with the theory is Jamie. They mention Victoria, so if this isn't Season 6B, this should be set during Season 4. But he's clearly much too old. But the Time Lords are capable of messing with memories. The theory says that the Doctor requested Jamie's assistance and so the Time Lords returned his memories. But they're slightly wrong, so he only thinks Victoria's travelling with them again. Or that the Doctor picked Victoria up again for some reason. The theory's not perfect, but it makes more sense than the same story without it. I think Season 6B is the best explanation for the continuity fuck-ups in this story, and was personally really glad when the BBC kind of accepted it. But anyway, The Two Doctors is like a decent story with a unique alien race that's been drowned in unnecessary crap. It's not the best or worst thing this season, but Colin and Patrick are great together. They've known each other for years, and it shows. The next story, Timelash, is one of the crap stories. It's about the planet Carful, ruled by the evil Borad, who's trying to instigate a war with a neighbouring planet. Now, like Varos, Carful has a unique system of justice. People are thrown into the Timelash, a time-space corridor that deposits people in a place that's a fate worse than death. Scotland. Yes, Scotland.
Have you ever been to Scotland, Dag?
Once. I ain't never going back. Not never.
My aunt lives in Scotland. She says it's quite nice.
Well, she's wrong.
Anyway, the Doctor is sent into the Timelash to recover an amulet taken by a woman who fell into it, as Perry teams up with the usual plucky rebel types. In Scotland, the Doctor finds the woman, the amulet, and a very young H.G. Wells, making this the second celebrity historical of the season. This story is full of references to Wells, has an incredible performance from Paul Darrow.
From what I remember, the Morlocks are not over-endowed with intelligence.
Ah, well, that can hardly be said of our beloved leader, the Borad of Carful, the most luminous force in this part of the galaxy.
Really?
And honestly features some of the best makeup in the show's history. Just check out the Borad. That's better than Star Trek will be doing for years to come. The rest of the makeup this story is meh, but the Borad is brilliant looking. This is hated because of its garish design and overall ridiculous plot. And it's a fair point. I personally can handle the design. The plot less so. This story was randomly referenced in an episode of the Sarah Jane Adventures when Jo Grant turned up. In Carful, there's a mural of the Third Doctor and Jo on an unseen adventure. And Jo mentioned that adventure when she turned up in the Sarah Jane Adventures. It was a reference that Russell T Davies had to explain to her in the commentary for the episode.
Because it's in one of these scenes you mentioned about a car fell. Do you know what that reference is?
No.
Because you talk about Peladon and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You talk about a car fell. That's a Colin Baker story where he goes to a planet called Carthel and they discover that John Pertwee and Joe Grant once visited there. It's a story you never did.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But you did off stage. That was then referred to on screen. So I kind of closed the circle here by having you.
How lovely.
It means you were really there.
So even famously bad Who sometimes gets referenced in the new stuff. Anyway, this is bad. I file it under crap. Luckily, our last story of the season, Revelation of the Daleks, is much better. It's so much better that it's the closest thing this season has to a classic. It's almost good. It's the funeral planet Necros, and since blue is the galactic colour of mourning, Six gets to try out his best ever look. That blue cape is pimp as fuck. This is Eric Sayward at his best. He's truly channeling his inner Robert Holmes here. The story is dark, bleak, and terribly funny. He even uses a patented Holmes-ish double act in it. What's going on is this. Davros has set up shop on Necros under the guise of the Great Healer. There, he's been feeding the galaxy with dead bodies.
But did you bother to tell anyone they might be eating their own relatives?
Certainly not! That would have created what I believe is termed consumer resistance.
I love that. He's also mutating dead bodies and turning them into a new generation of Daleks that are fiercely loyal to him. And we get a horrifying scene as Arthur Stengos, an old friend of the Doctor, is slowly being physically and mentally turned into a Dalek. And I bet you thought Asylum of the Daleks was original. Also involved are a couple of space mercenaries sent to murder Davros, one of which appears to be the War Doctor, but if the War Doctor was less famous and more doctorish, and the other is Sancho Panza. Also involved are a squad of Daleks sent by an opposing Davros-hating Dalek faction. We have a full-scale Dalek civil war here. There's a few interesting things here. Like when we see Davros hover, we have the first on-screen confirmation that Daleks can fly. There had been evidence before, but never on screen. There's a weirdly touching scene where a mutated former dead person attacks the Doctor and is beaten back to death. The role of the mutant was offered to Sir Laurence Olivier because he said he wanted to be in Doctor Who. And because he never did appear in Doctor Who, I guess he felt insulted. There's crap about a gravestone that makes no sense. And finally, comedian Alexei Sayle does the impossible and takes a really irritating supporting role and manages to make him even more irritating.
For those of you who are appreciative of the humanoid female form, we have a maiden in distress.
Shut the fool up!
The mercenaries are great creations. Davros is at his best here. Clive Swift, who played Mr. Copper in Voyage of the Damned, turns up. The dialogue is funny and the story is dark. This is the best story Colin Baker had on television, and it's almost good. If this was the standard for season 22, then this season wouldn't be infamous. It'd be average with a very interesting Doctor. But the high-up in the BBC had his way and the show was cancelled for 18 months. During that time there was a massive outcry, and when it came back, they tried a new direction to take the show in. Unfortunately, it was even worse than this one. Colin Baker was, and is, a fantastic Doctor. Nicola Bryant is, and was, fantastic as Perry. Terrible accident aside, that is. Neither of them were treated fairly by the BBC, the public, or the show itself. I'm delighted to say that when finally given a fair shake in audio, they usually outclass the other teams. Seriously, check out some of the Sixth Doctor audios. They're usually great. This season has a reputation for extreme violence, and it is more violent than usual, but I'm not really sure it's any more violent than any of the Hinchcliffe seasons. But it is offensive in the worst way. It's bad. Join me next time for the second season-long arc, The Trial of a Time Lord, where we'll finally see Brian Blessed in Doctor Who, we'll meet a race of vagina-headed space flowers, and gain the worst companion since Adric,